magical morning or merry midnight, wherever, whenever you may be around the world or across the dimensions. I'm Tillie Treadwell, and this is Brian Walker joining me today. Hi, Brian. Thank you for being here. I wanted to jump into this. You had asked me a question, and I'd love to give you an answer. So, my very favorite Christmas movie of all time, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. Who didn't see that
Oh,
one
great.
coming?
I actually, that's kind of a staple in our house. That's one of the Christmas movies that we always watch. Usually, when we're decorating the tree, we will watch, and this isn't a movie, actually, but SCTV, Second City Television. Um, it was a Canadian um, syndicated show in the 1970s, and in the early 1980s, NBC brought it to late night television, and it aired after Saturday Night Live on late Saturday nights. So it didn't usually start until about 1 o'clock in the morning. Uh,
Yeah.
and it was hysterically funny, and they did a couple of Christmas shows. SCTV lampooned television and filmed, and they did a lot of films as well. And those are two things that we always watch. Another thing that we watch when we're decorating the tree is an old public domain favorite called Santa Claus Conquers the Martians.
I
And
think I remember you talking about this on another show that we did together.
mm,
Oh my gosh. Yes. Yes.
it's probably best known for being Pia Zadora's first movie. You remember Pia Zadora from the 1980s.
Okay.
She made a big splash early on because she had married a very wealthy person who was able to finance a few films for her, and she got a Gold Globe for one of them. And she later on gave it up. Just I guess it just wasn't her thing. But she is still around, still very much a celebrity, getting close to about 70 now. Santa
Oh,
Claus Conquers the Martians will be 60 years old before too long. And one of the nice things about it is that, well, it kind of marries science fiction and holiday films. And at the time, it was pretty rare to do something like that. You didn't see too much fusion when it came to genre back then, and now it's all you get. How
yeah.
many? Think about how many Christmas horror films you can think of now. I mean, there are literally dozens of them.
Yes.
But they had to start somewhere, and there were a precious few of them actually until the 1970s. That seems to be when people got twisted enough to want to inject an element of horror into what's supposed to be a great pagan holiday. Um, but Santa Claus Conquers the Martians is in no way frightening at all. Actually, I don't think it has a terrible reputation because, well, terrible as being so bad it's funny.
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess I should put it that way. A campy reputation, largely because of Mystery Science Theater 3000. It aired on MST3K back in the 90s as one of their holiday episodes. And I mean, there's a lot to laugh about here. But I think it's kind of a remarkable film in that it was shot on Long Island in the summer of 1964, largely by soap opera, largely cast with soap opera actors and
Hmm.
people who were in off-Broadway productions. So there's no big star in it, but if you go down through the cast list, you'll see some people who did work fairly often on and off Broadway and in films and television, but no
Okay.
big names or anything like that. Pia Zadora, ironically, who's a child in this film, actually is the biggest name in it. Uh, but it's a fun movie. It was made for about $200,000, and it made its production money back very quickly. It was shot in color, which was impressive for a low budget film at that time. And like I said, it ran for years in kiddie matinees in the 60s and early 70s. And it just sort of trailed off at some point in the early 1970s and wound up as a public domain film that's in very good shape. A lot of public domain movies are really hard to watch because
Yeah.
The picture quality is from an old television print with terrible
Yeah,
pen and scan that has a million negative scratches, in it.
right.
And this one, you can watch it, download it, do anything you want to with it because it's public domain, and there are some great prints of it on archive.org. And on my website, I use exclusively content from archive.org because that website, which is free, by the way, they do take donations, however, but
Okay.
it's a free website and it's a compendium of public domain films. There's content from books that you can peruse as well, and you just have to register with the website. It's really remarkable, and I don't think it gets enough exposure. And the films embedded in my website are all from archive.org because I only try to post public domain programming so we don't get into rights trouble with anybody.
Yeah, I think that's a really wise move to make there.
Very wide. And there's so much great
Yeah.
content that's public domain. And now, with the way our wonderful legislators set it up, with each passing year, and in January, we will cross over into another year, we have another year's worth of public domain film. And in January, all 1928 films, produced and released in 1928, will become public domain. So we're actually getting into the sound era.
Oh.
And in only 3 more years past this coming year,
Uh-huh.
a lot of the Universal monster films will start becoming public domain, such as Frankenstein and Dracula. So if I can hold on for 3 more years, I'm really excited about posting those. And there are fabulous prints of those because Universal restored a lot of their classic monster movies several years ago and put them out on Blu-ray, which fortunately I have
Mhm.
copies of.
Mhm. Very interesting.
So I really
So,
do recommend watching Santa Claus Conquers the Martians. And like I said, you can see it on YouTube or I
yeah.
think, and I would say this month, all the streaming services probably have copies of it. If you have Prime or Peacock or Netflix, Hulu, whatever, I'm sure they all have copies of it because it's public domain and it's free content for them. They don't have to pay any rights. And
Yeah.
streaming services love cheap content.
So, could you give me a quick summary of this movie?
Certainly. Santa Claus Conquers the Martians. Gosh, how
Yeah,
do I
please.
do I dignify this with a summary? Gosh. Um, well,
Mercy on me.
it involves Martians watching their own version of television, and they're watching Earth programs. And there are two small children. One of them played by Pia Zadora, Golden Globe winner from 1982, who was about an 8-year-old child here. She's very young. Um, and her Martian parents are concerned that she and her brother are watching all of this Earth garbage Earth television, essentially. And it's the Christmas season, so Santa Claus is everywhere in this programming. But of course, there's only one real Santa Claus, and these well-meaning but misguided Martians decide to kidnap a Santa Claus and bring that Santa Claus to Mars for the children because the children on Mars aren't allowed to be individuals, and it's prophetic in a way because I think we do the same thing to children now.
Yeah, I
Um, we push them into sports majors in college way faster than I think that we should. We should just let them develop on their own. And everybody has different timing, for maturity. And well, and that's sort of what the Martians found in the 60s. Anyway, um, and the Martians come to Earth. They go to the North Pole and they get the real Santa Claus. They don't get one of the bell ringers from the Salvation Army or one of
one of
the
Santa's
one of
helpers.
the one of the
Yeah.
department store Santa Clauses. And my mother took me to a department store and had my picture taken with Santa Claus. I think I was about 3 or 4 years old. And even though that was so long ago, I still have vivid memories of just that day and just being in that situation.
Yeah.
Um, and I've probably seen this movie 50 times, which tells you how sad my life is. But it's
Oh.
but it's a lot but the movie's a lot of fun, to tell you the truth. And
Well, I don't think it's sad. I watch the same stuff over and over too. So I mean, I guess my life sucks too, but anyway,
my life's pretty good, actually. It does not suck.
I think
Um,
so.
but that's the crux of the movie. Santa Claus is kidnapped and brought to Mars to bring Christmas to Mars. And there are a couple of them. There's some Martian drama because some of the Martians who kidnap Santa Claus actually want to kill him instead, or do away with him because they think that he's ruining the children of Mars. And there are a couple of American children who have stowed away on the Martian spaceship, and they go to Mars as well.
Okay.
Um, so no spoilers for how it turns out, but it's a happy ending. And I'll just say that children on Mars and on Earth are allowed to enjoy Christmas finally.
Fair enough. So
So
do
it's
the Mars,
heartwarming.
hmm?
It's heartwarming.
It sounds like it. Do the Martian people look a lot like Earth people or
Well, they do, except that they're wearing green leotards and have on green pancake makeup. Other than that, they're pretty identical.
all right, all right. Hmm, cool. So I, for some reason, was thinking that when you were saying Santa Claus conquers the Martians, I was thinking it was going to be more of, dare I say, a modern day kind of slasher movie with Santa Claus going over there and kicking their butts or defending the Earth from invasion. And I'm I'm struggling to ask you any more questions about this movie because I just had such a strong image and you obliterated it. And it's fried my mind, which is probably a good thing. It's a lot more wholesome than I was expecting.
Well, it is, but there again, baby steps.
Yeah.
It was made for children, and it was made to pacify and entertain children, the way a lot of 1950s and 1960s entertainment geared towards children was supposed to do. You don't really get into anything twisted in terms of Christmas films, really, until the early 70s. All of a sudden, it's like somebody flipped a switch and Christmas got real dark all of a sudden.
Mhm.
And one of my favorite examples of this is a British film called Tales from the Crypt. It's got a really impressive cast
Yeah.
with Peter Cushing. Joan Collins is in it. Freddie Francis, a really well-known B movie auteur from Britain, directed this. He did a lot of horror films in the 60s and
Hmm.
70s. He did Trog, which is Joan Crawford's last film, and he did some others. He was actually, I think, a better director than his biography would have you believe. He often had very little money to work with, but I don't think that makes one a bad director. I think it probably
No.
makes somebody a really resourceful, good director.
Hmm.
And the movie is one of these British films that Amicus and Hammer did in the early 70s, where there wasn't one storyline, there were, let's say, four or five. And each story is a 10 or a 15-minute vignette, and they're all tied together at the beginning and at the end. And
Yeah.
um, the Christmas episode, the Christmas segment in Tales from the Crypt is actually the one that stars Joan Collins. She has bumped off her husband, kind of
Oh,
very violently, so you get to see it, and is trying to cover up the, the fact that she just did her
yeah.
like husband did. And all the while, this homicidal maniac has escaped from an insane asylum and fancies himself as a sort of Santa Claus, but he's kind of a really dirty, gritty Santa Claus. His beard is dirty. His costume is dirty,
Yeah. Yeah.
And we'll just say that poor Joan Collins gets her comeuppance for murdering her husband in the segment. But it's a lot of fun, and thank the Brits for sort of breaking us in there. There's another
Yeah.
film. There's another film released the same year that also has a Christmas theme, if it doesn't directly address Christmas at all, and that's Silent Night, Bloody Night.
I
Silent
have
Night, Bloody
heard
Night.
of that somewhere.
Well, it's a public domain title, so
Oh,
it's one of those that you can watch right now on any streaming platform that you can find. Archived. The big problem with Silent Night, Bloody Night is that it's recent enough and it was made well enough so that there should be better copies of it. But every copy that I've seen of it has blown out color, and the prints are washed out. But you can get widescreen copies of it instead of those terrible pan and scans. The best thing to know about Silent Night, Bloody Night is that Mary Warrenoff, the cult film movie star from the 70s and 80s and 90s as well, is the star of the film. But instead of it being very campy, which is what a lot of her films were, like Death Race 2000,
huh.
Eating Raoul, a lot of her films have kind of a humorous but morbid
Hmm.
um, kind of undertone. This is just a straight up horror film and a straight acting part for her, and she does a great job in it. Patrick O'Neill, a well-known actor who did a lot of television in the '60s and '70s, is a star. John Carradine, who appeared in every horror. I think it was in his contract that he had to appear in every horror film, like from 1942 until he died. He's in it, but
Uh-huh.
oddly enough, he has such a sonorous voice. You can his his voice is unmistakable. You would know it anywhere, right? He is mute in this film and just grunts, and the grunts are even dubbed in, so it's not even him grunting. So it's odd to have this you, a star of his stature
Hmm.
um, in a fairly low budget film, but then not to give him any lines. It's just wow,
Yeah.
way to miss the boat. Uh, but and there's kind of a sad footnote in this film. It's a really interesting movie. Silent Night, Bloody Night takes place on Christmas Eve in 1935, 1950, and 1970. Um, and it also involves a deranged lunatic who's escaped from an asylum and comes into town and starts killing people on Christmas Eve.
Yeah. Yeah.
And okay, these early '70s films are kind of like the first marriage of a holiday enchantment and horror, at the same time. And it's interesting that they were both released during the same year.
Hmm.
I think that's really fascinating. And as we move through the '70s, more and more of this pops up. And one of my
Yeah.
favorite Christmas horror films, which has been remade fairly recently, is Black Christmas from
Yes, I
1974.
do believe that that was recently remade.
It was. I have
Yeah.
not seen the remake. I'm typically of the mindset that, especially with low budget movies, the first time is the best. I hate to see people
Yeah.
take I hate to see people take a low budget movie and then throw all this money at it. You're never going to make it any more special than it already is. So how about you just restore an old print of this to the point where it looks new, and you spend that money on it and then bring that back to the theaters. Try that one. Black Christmas, though, is a really interesting film. It was directed by Bob Clark, the director of A Christmas Story, which is now a Christmas tradition, for a
Yes.
lot of people. But he made a Christmas movie before this one, and Bob Clark, in the early part of his career, specialized in horror films.
Mm.
And Black Christmas is a really effective, well done horror film. It's got a great storyline. It has a fantastic cast in it as well. Olivia Hussey is one of the stars. Keir Delay, who was a big star in the 60s. He's in 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
Andrea Martin, who has been in lots of television and film for the past 50 or more years, and a Second City television alum, is in the film in straight part. She's not doing comedy, which is kind of rare for her. John Saxon, Margot Kidder from Superman, and a host of other
Okay.
films. And she has a great role in this as well. She really, I think, her performance in this is probably the strongest of
Mm,
anybody's. Now she has a great meaty role. She's a college student in a sorority, and she's really hateful, but she's not what you usually see in films when it comes to hateful
mm.
sorority
Yeah.
dwellers. She's clearly has an alcohol
Oh,
problem, and has some things in her past that kind of have led her to this kind of
uh,
sad state of affairs in her life. But at least she's got enough money to go skiing and go to college and things like that. So her life is, she has first world problems,
right.
uh, I suppose. Well, but one of her big first world problems is that there's a homicidal maniac who's on this college campus.
Mm.
The murders are very graphic, and one by one, the people who reside in this sorority house, including the sorority mother, who was a matron in her early 50s, meet their ends in the film. And like I said, it's an early Bob Clark movie, and Bob Clark, as we know, did A Christmas Story with Peter Billingsley, Melinda Dillon, and Darren McGavin. And it, the thing about Bob Clark is that his early low budget movies are the ones that have stood the test of time. After he proved himself as a director, he did a string of really forgettable films that were bigger, much bigger budgeted, and had high quality casts in them, but none of them really replicated the magic of his early films.
Mm.
His first film is not a Christmas movie, but it is worth watching and is public domain as well. And it's called "Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things." The
I've
very
never heard of that movie before.
it's got a fantastic title,
Yeah, yeah,
but
it
but
does.
but the movie itself, the movie's made by Bob Clark, and a lot of amateurs, are the stars of it. But it is really creepy. If you like horror films, and if you like horror films with a twist, I guess I should say, this one's really inventive. It's shot very inexpensively, but shot in color. And a public domain film is, as we said, oftentimes not in good
Yeah.
shape to watch. Children shouldn't play with dead things. There are some great copies of it on the internet and free of charge to watch. So
Excellent.
something. Black Christmas is not public domain, however. And Bob Clark shot Black Christmas for about $800,000. And like I said, he had a great cast on.
Hmm.
He shot it in Toronto,
Mm.
because back then Toronto wasn't as big of a city as it is now, and it was
Yeah.
much cheaper to shoot there. I don't think that's really the case anymore. A lot of production has shifted back to Hollywood because it's actually become cheaper to shoot films there, because you have people who know their craft, and they're all right there. You have qualified camera people, people who can actually churn out scripts, as opposed
Yeah,
to,
yeah.
you and people who know how to act, who know how to hit their marks. They can recite their lines with a minimum of retakes.
Hmm.
So back in 50 years ago, however, oftentimes it was cheaper to go to a smaller location, like
Oh,
something like
yeah.
Toronto was at the time. Now Toronto is a huge city, and very
Yeah.
nice, as a matter of fact, one of my favorite cities. And I only live about 7 hours from Toronto, so I'm
I
sort of.
don't remember where exactly are you?
Hmm. I am in Morgantown, West Virginia, home of West Virginia University. My
That's
former
right.
employer. I retired in
Yeah.
June, and we are about an hour south of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Okay, that's not bad at all. And
No,
I've
we
never been to Canada, but one day I do dream to go.
now where are you located?
Lake Mary, Florida.
Oh, okay, all right, very good. I'm familiar, very familiar with Florida. I used to live in Panama City.
Oh, nice. Yeah, you and I got busy chatting about other stuff, but I was surprised to hear that you're going to be so close to me soon because you're coming here for a vacation. That's wonderful.
Yeah, we're going to spend some time at Disney, and then we'll
Yes.
one our favorite beach town is St. Augustine Beach, just south of Jacksonville. And we usually spend about a week there
Mhm.
every spring, usually early May, um, when it's still low season and when the temperatures down there aren't so hot.
Yeah,
I don't do heat very well, um, so that kind of explains why I try to stay out of Florida in June, July, and
yeah,
August.
yeah. I wish that I had that option right now because it's just brutal. I was born here, but then I have a lot of family, well, had a lot of family up north. And well, they, long story short, they all had me really late in life. So all of my family has passed on. But
Oh, sorry.
I I appreciate that. Yeah. But I moved back here with my hubby and I regret it most of the year, to be honest, because it is hot as Hades here. And then, that humidity. I have long, thick hair. It freezes me out. And then I'm allergic to the sunlight on top of it. So it was just like the dumbest move I could have made. So I don't know. I might move up to West Virginia with you, bud.
Well, we've been looking for somewhere else to go, actually.
Yeah.
We we both worked here at the university, and like I said, we're both retired now.
Yeah.
Um, and although there are things that I've liked about living here, and I've made a lot of great friends here. Unfortunately, a lot of them have since passed on.
Mhm.
And we've been looking at some other areas to relocate. One of them is Savannah, Georgia, that we've looked at. But we were there in early August. We spent several days at Tybee Island, Savannah's
Mm,
beach, and then spent the rest of the time in Savannah. And I thought I was going to
yeah.
die in Savannah. It was so humid. The beach, we were right on the beach. So there was always a breeze coming in. And no matter how hot it is, you can stand it, at the beach. But in Savannah, which I love, it's a beautiful town, great food, lots of things to do, lots of things to see. And I had to change clothes 3 times one day
Yep.
because I was just
Yep.
walking.
I'm not at all surprised. And we have a mutual friend who's moving to Georgia soon, Michael Waterman.
Who is moving to Savannah,
Yeah,
actually. Is
Savannah.
Savannah, have you ever been to Savannah?
I have not. I've been through Georgia before. It feels very similar to Florida to me. I wouldn't move there personally, but we are looking at the Carolinas.
Okay. We've looked at North Carolina some.
Yeah. We
And
have offers. Hmm?
hmm,
Oh, we have offers to go do this show live and in person, or at minimum, take actual walks with our guests in now 4 different states. So we're looking at ways to move out of the cottage that we've been in for the last few years and find another situation that gives us more freedom to make more of a go at this. And then my hubby too, he can do a lot of his work wherever he likes in the nation. So we're looking at traveling a little bit more and maybe becoming snowbirds. I mean, maybe 30 or 40 years too early, but you know.
I don't know. Um, no, that makes perfect sense to me. We have thought about, I don't, you wouldn't call it a snowbird, but we have actually thought about having two residences, which I don't want to do because upkeep
Mm,
on two places is horrible.
yeah.
We thought about having a summer place, um, in the north where the temperatures are really nice in summer months,
Yeah.
and then having a winter, a place to winter where
Mhm.
it is warmer. I would love something coastal, but that's becoming more and more unaffordable. so, so I guess I could be flexible. Maybe the mountains of North Carolina. There's a lot of beautiful places there. Asheville would be one place to check out in North Carolina. Boone, North Carolina, is also a great place to go. Um, and they have four seasons in Boone as well. Since it's at a high elevation, you get some snows, some interesting deep snows there. There's a lot of things to check out in the Carolinas. It's interesting. North Carolina, especially, I think, it's a really interesting, beautiful state.
I agree. I agree.
And it's my
Um,
birthplace. Where I was born.
really?
Yes.
So how did you wind up over there in West Virginia?
Well, my parents are originally from the Huntington area,
Okay,
and,
gotcha.
but they traveled wherever my father's career kind of led them. Um,
Mm,
and he had a couple of careers that involved a lot of travel and a lot of moving. So we lived sort of here, there, and everywhere, for a long time.
mm.
And I went to college at this same university that I'm now retired from. So I've been in this town a long time.
Oh wow. That's
and
awesome.
when I was a journalism major as an undergraduate, and I was walking across campus. And I was probably 19 years old, and I thought, gosh, it looks like being a professor is a pretty sweet life. You get to work with students. It's not so regimented. It's not as stressful. It can
Yeah,
be, but it's not as
yeah.
stressful as being an accountant or something like that. And
For
that's what
sure.
I latched on to.
So you just chose it and off you were.
Well, and several years ago, I read an article about the most stress-free occupations, and the occupations where people live the longest, and one of the longest lived was professor. I think
Okay.
it's because of the lack of stress.
Yeah.
And I'm here to tell you, I really enjoy teaching. I love being in the classroom. Actually, when I wrapped up my classes yesterday, it kind of got to me a little bit because I thought, gosh, I really like these students.
Uh,
To share. But some of them, I think between the two classes that I'm teaching this fall, five of my students are graduating seniors. They're graduating this fall semester, um, and it's time for them to take over.
yeah.
That they need to go out and support me.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Whenever I'm able to collect Social
Yeah.
Security, I'll be looking forward to them making big bucks, so they can keep me sweet.
Yeah, basically. I hear you though about the stress. So my job is that I am a wife. That's all I do outside of this. And
Okay.
that's enough for me. It's very stress-free for the most part, and I enjoy being a companion, and that's I would rather be nothing else in the world. So that's my happy ending, and I'm glad that we both found ours.
Well, it took me a while. I mean, I actually
Yeah.
wound my way through a couple of other careers, but I managed to stay with the state the whole time, so I was able to retire early. With the state of West Virginia, I was able to retire after. Um, I think my eligibility started at the 30-year mark,
So you
and I've
retired
been with
when you
this.
were
I was with the state.
42.
No, not quite. Um, but I've like I don't I hate to use the word blessed, but I've been very
Fortunate.
fortunate. Yes, I've been very fortunate to have had a career that I really enjoyed. And when I stopped enjoying the non-academic aspects of it, I was able to move on, and still keep my health insurance, which is huge, and my dental insurance, and
Yeah.
still putting food on the table, just working part time. So yeah, I am a very fortunate person
That is wonderful.
and,
Speaking of,
relatively stress free.
yes, amen. So you're going to be living hopefully for quite a long time. Speaking of
Trying
fortune,
to.
I think you're doing a great job, dear. You got this. I do want to ask your opinion.
Okay.
Um, we were talking about fortunate and whatnot. It reminded me of the sequel that I saw to A Christmas movie or A Christmas Story. Did you see that sequel?
I wanted to see that, and I just never got around to it. But that's where they brought Peter Billingsley back,
Yeah, yeah.
and he still has those big, striking blue eyes, that he had as a
Oh yeah.
child, and they're still as
Yeah,
bright as they were.
yeah. So I think that it's a wonderful movie, and I wasn't very close to my family. So my family, all very super, super old-fashioned German and Irish. So just a very tough crowd. They had me late in life. They were children should be seen and not heard, all of that. So I never experienced, I know, right? I never
I used to say
experienced
that,
any,
yeah.
uh-huh. I had no heartbreak when any of my family members passed. But I know it sounds horrible for me to say. Oh my gosh.
No, no, it sounds
Oh,
awesome.
so in this sequel, they have the main character from the original come back, and they've got the whole cast basically as much as they can get, anyways. And the mom is the original character as well,
Mhm.
and she's phenomenal in here. But the whole story revolves around them losing so her husband and the main character's father. And it just reminded me of how fortunate a lot of people are to have those close, wonderful relationships and whatnot. And it was such a bittersweet type of story. And I was going to ask your opinion about the movie, but if you've never seen it, it doesn't matter. So I'm going to ask your opinion about the original.
I first saw the original movie was a bomb. It did not do well at the box office at all.
Yes, I
Uh,
remember.
and I don't know why, because it's beautifully made. It really
I
is.
agree.
Very touching.
Yes,
Shot extremely well. And there again, it's not a big budget film.
right.
Fantastic cast and great
Yeah,
performance, from
yeah,
everybody.
yeah. And
Um,
hilarious, I think, anyway.
yeah,
Yeah,
and very and heartwarming at the same time. It really
yeah,
is.
yeah.
I first saw it on HBO probably about a year after it came out. So I probably saw it in '84 because we had cable. Well, I was already in college at the time. My mother had cable, and our you back then you didn't have the 300 channels or 400 channels like you do now. So we had probably like 12 channels, and one of them was home box office or HBO.
Yeah.
And that's where I first saw A Christmas Story, and loved it the first time I watched it. I thought, wow, this is hilarious, and I love Darren McGavin because he had been on one of my favorite 1970s shows when I was a kid called The Night Stalker, which was a
Oh,
horror. Which was a horror anthology television show. Well, it's not really an anthology show, but every week there's a different there's a strangler or a vampire or
yeah, yeah,
a wolf man or something like that
yeah.
every episode. It was brilliantly done, a very very smart, fun television show that should have lasted longer than a year, but I don't think Darren McGavin could handle it anymore.
Mm,
He was doing so much. He wasn't just the star of it; he was doing a lot of the production
yeah.
work, behind the scenes work, and I think it probably was just it probably caused him a nervous breakdown. But the show is brilliant. If you can ever see it, Me TV was running it for a while, a number of years ago, and I would say it'll probably pop up on another network before too long because the show. There's only like 26 or so episodes, but it's much beloved of people from my generation. And Darren McGavin, was the star of that show, and just a few years later is the dad in A Christmas Story, and
That's a
he
heck of a
really
crossover.
well, he delivers. He's crusty, but he really brings something heartwarming to the movie, especially at the end where he buys Ralphie the gun that his mother doesn't want to have, and then he ruins his glasses with it. The movie I think is just so heartwarming, and Peter Billingsley, who's just a child, when this was shot, does an awesome job in it.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know how Bob Clark got some of those reactions out of those child actors, but it's just fabulous.
Maybe
And
they kind of sprung the scene on them. Maybe that's how. And it just kind of worked out or something, do you think?
I mean, like in Alien, where have you ever seen the film Alien? Well, there's
No.
in the original with Sigourney Weaver and John Hurt there, and gosh, there's Angela Cartwright's in it. It's a great cast. There's a scene where John Hurt, who's had a face hugger attached to him for a while, which finally dies,
Oh my
um, is trying to eat dinner with everybody else, and all of a sudden his stomach erupts and this alien spews out of his stomach.
God. Ooh.
And the shock on the cast members' faces in the film is genuine because the director didn't tell them what was going to
Yeah,
happen,
yeah.
because he wanted um that initial reaction, and got apparently he was berated by some cast members afterward, but got the reaction that he wanted. And I think the element of surprise when somebody doesn't know that it's coming, if you can make sure that they'll stay in character as opposed to
Yeah.
throw, throwing a Klieg light at you or something for scaring them to death.
Yeah. I've often wondered about the terrific scenes though in A Christmas Story and a few others too. I wonder if it's real genuine reaction because it just seems like it is too organic to fake, at least to me. But I don't know. I don't know.
And working with children is so hard
Yeah.
too,
Yeah.
and there's Ralphie. He's the main character. Peter Billingsley carries the movie. Now he'd had a lot of. He was an experienced actor even with this film. He'd been on Real People in the late 1970s, which was a television show, and
Okay.
done a lot of commercials. He was Messy Marvin in a string of 1970s commercials. So he knew how to act. He could do it. But all of the child actors in it are just fabulous.
Yeah.
The lines that they recite don't sound canned. They don't sound written. They sound honest and genuine, as if this is just happening. Um, and the older folks that I know, the ones who might remember that era, which is like late 1930s, early 1940s,
Yeah.
and my parents weren't even born then, found the movie really heartwarming. My stepfather, who passed away about 8 years ago, could remember like old time radio before days before television and such, and I was one of his favorite movies. And when TBS started running it 24 hours a day a number of years ago, he would just leave it
Yes.
on.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember that. They used to do that even when I was a little one. They'd have full 24-hour marathons of A Christmas Story. And I remember my
Mhm.
grandmother and my own parents were really excited about that. And they did the same thing. It would just be on in the background constantly, and they'd poke their head out from around the corner and catch bits of it and then go back to what they were doing. And at the
And
time, I was too young to understand the sentimentality of the movie, but now that I'm older, I really do get it. Yeah.
no, you're right. It is incredibly sentimental.
Yes.
But the thing that I've enjoyed about it is that it's so realistic as well. The house that they live in, which was probably built in the teens or 20s,
Yeah.
and they have all of these electrical appliances plugged into one outlet. Yeah, because houses
We
back
think
then,
that.
if you had one or two electrical outlets in a room, that was something. You
Yes.
didn't have an outlet every 6 feet like you do in my house because it was
Yeah.
built, much later. Uh,
Yeah.
they got little details like that that he just nailed. And I that takes a lot of thought, a lot of planning,
Mhm.
and just brilliant. And like I said, Darren McGavin and Melinda Dillon are awesome.
Oh, they are.
They both nail well, and Peter Billingsley. I mean, he's a child and
Yeah.
just does a fantastic job on a film that was shot largely in Cleveland. And I only live about 3 hours or so from Cleveland, so
Right.
we're through that area quite a bit going to Michigan. Um, and several times a year actually. And that house recently sold.
It did. Yeah.
And I think somebody is it kind of turned it into a tourist attraction, which it should be.
Yeah.
I I know that before Bob Clark died, he had an untimely death. He was hit by a drunk driver when he was with
Oh,
his
what?
son in 2007. They both and sadly both he and his son passed away as a result of the accident.
That's
But I'm glad
tragic.
that he got to. It was. I'm glad he got to see what is essentially his best movie, to tell you the truth. I'm glad he
Mhm.
got to see it become a hit, even though it
Yeah.
was a failure at first. Um,
Yeah.
that had to have that had to have made him feel good because you can tell that he put a ton of time and effort into this film, only for it to not do
Yeah.
initially at the box office. But then all of us now it's beloved. You can't walk into a
Oh, yeah.
store without seeing like a Christmas ornament of the leg lamp or,
That's
or something like that.
the
I think
chemistry between the mother and the father actors in the leg lamp scenes absolutely killed it. I die of laughter every time I watch that. And just the stuttering and the anger that comes out of this man. I Every time it fools me. This can't be acting. It looks too real. It looks exactly like what I would imagine.
well, and the thing that I like about it too is that Melinda Dillon does it so subtly.
Yeah.
She she wants this thing out of her house. Well, and she's not subtle about breaking it,
Yeah.
but she wants this thing out of her house,
Yeah.
and she's going to get it one way or another. And
Mhm.
that determination is what I love.
Oh,
And she's able to do all that without causing like a huge rift between them.
yeah.
Uh, I think it's just brilliant. And
Yeah.
sadly, she passed away only about a year ago.
I remember hearing about that.
Yeah.
I was a little sad about that too. Man, about the leg lamp though. Yeah, that whole scene, her feminine wiles certainly showed through, I thought.
Well, and actually, her intelligence. To tell
True.
you that that the way her character handled that in the movie
Yeah.
is the best way
Yeah.
possible.
Yes. And
And
it was wonderful that that movie didn't depict her as being completely helpless and hopeless in the face of her husband's obnoxiousness. I appreciated that personally.
well, and I hate to say it, but back in those days, women were supposed to you were your husband's appendage.
Yeah.
At least that's what you were being told, in films and in radio and whatever.
Yeah.
And to see her sort of to see her stand up and say no, I think is just brilliant. And the way she does it, she's going to get her way about it one way or the other. And I think the way her character handles that is just so smart, so brilliant, and
Hmm.
and, and exactly the way that kind of a passive aggressive person would do it. you know.
Yeah, yeah, and ladies back then, I think a lot of the time that was their best bet to get their needs met and to set certain boundaries with men.
Was to be
And
smart,
yeah, it was to be extremely smart
outwit
about
them.
it and to be subtle, like you said, to be very subtle. Well, as subtle as you can manage. I mean, she was there cracking up while he was doing the cleanup, and I can't say I blame her, really.
Yeah, I think that's the best part of it at all. You you, she and Bob Clark could have handled that in a dozen different ways,
Yeah.
and the fact that she does start giggling in the middle of it, I don't know if that was in the script or if that's just something
Right.
that came out because she
Yeah.
was reacting to the way he was reacting.
Yeah.
But it's just a great piece of cinema. It really is, and to have it, you it was a small movie, didn't cost very much,
Mhm.
largely shot in Cleveland and in Indiana.
Yeah.
In Higbee's, the store that they're in, I think that was shot in an old store somewhere in Indiana, as I recall. I could be mistaken about that, but as I
Right.
recall, it was,
Right.
and just so much fun. And out of all, I've got a lot of favorite holiday films. Christmas in Connecticut, the original with Barbara Stanwyck and Sidney Greenstreet. If you have never seen that before, watch it. I
Okay.
I don't know if you've ever seen a Barbara Stanwyck film or not, but she was a terrific film noir actress. She was a really good femme fatale in some 1940s film noir, and she was in a lot of pre-code movies in the 30s too.
Hmm.
uh, and very strong, independent female characters. She started in the Big Valley on ABC television in the '60s, where she's the head of a family of ranchers, wealthy ranchers, but she's the head of the family in the film. So her female characters are always really strong.
Hmm.
And in Christmas in Connecticut, which was released in the mid 1940s. She is a columnist who is sort of the Martha Stewart of her day. Um,
Okay.
she's very in her column. She's very homey and cooks a lot and decorates her home for her husband and her children. When in reality, she's a single working woman and doesn't cook, doesn't clean, doesn't decorate anything, and has to because the person who owns the um, the paper that she works for wants her to come and do Christmas at his um, uh, house in Connecticut, which is beautiful. You know, it's a very wealthy, beautiful home. It's a really heartwarming. It's a comedy. It's really heartwarming. I recommend that you watch it. And Barbara
All
Stanwyck is
right.
just brilliant in it. I mean, she always turned in a great performance, but in this one, she could have been hammy with it, but it's very subtle. And
Gotcha.
I think that's the mark of a really good quality actor or actress, is subtle.
I agree.
And
I
and and Christmas in Connecticut, just brilliant. Watch the original, don't watch the remakes. Go for the original.
Oh, there's several, huh?
You can get it on. I think our copy is Blu-ray, so it's not public domain, sadly. But
Gotcha.
it's a wonderful Christmas film.
I'll have to watch that. To be honest, I've been struggling finding some some downtime since starting the show and then really getting things up and rolling because when Tim Swartz and I started this show, we didn't quite expect it to pick up this quickly. And I don't know if you've checked out my channel, but I have had interviews almost every day since I want to say the end of November, maybe a little bit before then, plus all of my standalone shows. Just yesterday, I signed for another writing deal. So someone had approached me about another authorship type deal, and I said yes. So now I've got that to work on each month and interviews and the standalone shows, plus, taking care of the old hubby and the house and everything. I have not had time to watch a movie yet, but I will put it on my list so that if I do get some time this month, I'm going to watch it.
Well, and one more film that I think you should watch
Okay.
that that is a Christmas themed horror film from
Ooh.
1980. It's called Christmas Evil, or You Better Watch Out. It has two different titles. Brandon Maggart is the star. He is singer Fiona Apple's father.
Okay.
Interesting. He is about 90 years old now, but he's still alive.
Oh,
He's still with us, and he is the star of Christmas Evil. This is John Waters' favorite holiday film. So that should probably tell you something about Christmas Evil. Now,
Yeah.
it's a well-made film, however, and there's nothing in it that you would attribute to a John Waters film. There's no puke, there's nobody eating dog excrement or anything like that. But Brandon Maggart is a very devoted employee at a toy company and takes Christmas very seriously and spies on local children to see if they're being naughty or nice. So there's a creepy element to it,
That is really creepy.
but he this the role for him is very non-sexualized. I mean, there's nothing sexual about it at all. He really buys into the whole view who is naughty, who is nice, and is very devoted to Christmas, in general. It was shot in New Jersey and New York and Pennsylvania in during the winter of 1979, early 1980, for about $800,000. And you get to watch his character sort of descend into madness. He becomes more and more warped, more and more twisted. Starts killing people very imaginatively, and you can't help but to root for him because the people he's bumping off really are portrayed in a really negative light. They are garbage, disgusting people, with a lot of malice and ill will. And he's going to, right that wrong by rubbing them out.
All right.
And he does. So I love films that take an antagonist and make them the protagonist instead.
Mhm.
So the audience has to root for something that they ordinarily would never,
Yeah.
want to promote or anything. And those are some of my favorite films when a film can manipulate you into cheering on somebody who's doing horrible things. But in the name of goodness, uh, some of those are some of the best films. And Christmas Evil is a great movie. I highly recommend taking a look at it. It's from 1980.
Good to know. Very good to know. Well, my friend, we are drawing to the close of our time today, but it has been an absolute pleasure. And I would like to book you for a Halloween special next year where we talk about monster movies. What do you think about that?
I would love to. Halloween's my favorite time of year other than Christmas. So, yeah, I would love to do that.
Awesome, awesome. So we'll set that up off camera. In the
Perfect.
meantime, my dear, where can people find you if they've not yet heard of you?
Well, you can always visit me at briansdrive-in-theater.com. That's Brian with an I. And if you want to interact with me on social media, I'm on Facebook and X. I almost said again.
Good catch, good catch.
Um, but I only lurk on X these days. I still enjoy it, but I just lurk. If you want to interact with me, I am very active on Facebook. I post a movie of the day every day. Plus, I also post and repost information about area drive-ins, or
Oh,
well, not area drive-ins. I do post a lot about drive-ins in this area. Since I live so close to Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania is the state with the most still operating drive-ins of any state in existence.
I didn't even know that they still existed, to be honest with you.
There's about 25 of them in Pennsylvania, and down from probably 500, once upon a time.
Okay,
But
okay.
there's within an hour's drive of my house, there's probably 3 or 4 drive-ins, and that's these days it's pretty remarkable.
That
But
sounds remarkable.
I'd like to have one of my own. So there's one that's about 35 or 40 miles from where I live that I think is going to come up for sale. It's been dark for a couple of years because the owners passed away during COVID. They both had COVID,
Oh,
and they were around my age. I'd love to see if that's available. I think you could turn that into a great menu, but we'll see.
I think you should do it. I totally support that. And I think
I
you'd be
should too.
wonderful at it. All right, my friends. Well, thank you so much, Brian,
Thank you,
for
Tillie.
sitting with me today. My absolute pleasure and honor, my friend. I'm going to book you for a Halloween special as soon as we're done. And in the meantime,
Perfect.
everyone, please do kindly go check out Brian's work. Check out all of the wonderful stuff he has online and support him because supporting someone like Brian is supporting someone like me. And we both greatly appreciate it. Until next time, friends, goodbye.